Hello students, welcome back. Now we are going to discuss the second B question of Sociology optional paper 2025. Right? This is a series of YouTube videos in which we are discussing the previous year questions. Now we have started with 2025 and once we finish 2025, we'll continue further. Right? So if you want to remain informed about these discussions, please like and subscribe the channel. Right? So here this is the question and this is question number 2B, Sociology optional paper 1 CSE 2025. What was the question? Highlight the main features of historical materialism as propounded by Marx. How far is this theory relevant in the understanding contemporary societies? Explain. Right? Now this is simple, right? Second part is what? They are simply asking, is it relevant today? If I cut short this whole long sentence, how far is this theory relevant in understanding contemporary societies? I can write it in 3 words, 4 words. Is it relevant today? Right? So first we'll see the features and after that we'll be discussing about the relevance. So what are the salient features? Right? So salient features are, first you see economic or materialistic determinism. Right? That means what he says, this is called as monist philosophy. Monist philosophy means you see all the realities reducible to a single one. And such type of approach in sociology or social sciences is known as determinism. Means if you know the economy of the society, that is material conditions of the society, then you can know what would be the nature of a state, what would be the religion, what would be the family, what would be the educational system, what kind of culture would be there in the society, etc., etc. This is called base superstructure metaphor that we have written here. Base superstructure metaphor means there is a base in society, right? And over and above whatever the institutions are there. So here base is economy. What are the superstructure? The superstructure is state, religion, family, educational system, etc. So whatever is there, that is based on the economy. This type of theory is known as economic determinism. So what is that? Marx's theory of historical materialism is characterized as economic determinism. Now after that what he says, in a society, in a particular stage there are only 2 classes, right? So if you see through Weber, what you will find, Weber talks about many classes, that is called subjective approach, but here this is called objective approach. He says there are only 2 classes, owner, non-owner. Owner means owner of property or assets of production. Non-owner means those who work for that owner, right? Now he talks about different stages in society: primitive communism, then ancient society, then feudal society, then capitalist society. Then he talks about proletariat revolution, doom of capitalism, then socialist society, and after that finally communist society. And he says communism would be the end of the history, means after that there won't be any change in the society. In the first stage, primitive communism, there is no class. It is known as classless society. After that, because at that time there is no concept of private property. After that, the private property emerges. This private property, how it emerges, that is a matter of detailed discussion. Relationship that divides society into two classes. One is owner class, another is non-owner class. Now, what is the relationship between these classes? The relationship is one of conflict and complementarity. For example, if you see capitalist society, we have capitalists and workers. Capitalists and workers, there is a conflict of interest between them, right? Capitalists want maximum profit and workers want maximum salary. So there is a conflict, right? But without workers, capitalist cannot produce anything in his factory, and without capitalists, workers would not get work for their survival or their livelihood. So this is called conflict and complementarity. Then it talks about a mechanism. What brings changes? Though Marx's analysis of changes is different for change in primitive communism to ancient society and capitalism to socialism. So we are talking about what is the mechanism of social change that Marx talks about. He calls it two things. One is called as class struggle, another is called as internal contradiction or contradiction between NFOP, new forces of production, versus old relations of production. Now, when you suppose we are comparing between two societies, and here maximum students make mistake. In feudal society, we have two classes, barons and serfs. As I said earlier, the relationship between barons and serfs is one of conflict and complementarity. So there is a class struggle between barons and serfs. But this struggle, this dimension of a struggle is incapable of bringing change. Generally in the answers, people don't go in that detail. They simply write class struggle changes society. But which dimension of class struggle? One dimension is the class struggle between minority dominant class and majority subordinate class, like feudal lords or barons and serfs. But this struggle is not going to change the society, right? So what is going to change the society? Right? When there is stage in society, suppose feudalism, so forces of production keeps on developing. Whenever new forces of production develop, they cannot work within the old relations of production. Now there are certain people who are ready to, forces of production is technology, right? So those people who are capable of using new technology for the production process. For example, barons were expert in the agricultural production, capitalists were expert in the manufacturing sector or industrial production. Now, definitely there was different relations of production in this period. So what will happen? There will be conflict. Capitalists would like to create a new system and barons would like to maintain the old system. Both are in minority. So both will be in struggle, right? This dimension of class struggle means the struggle between old dominant class and emerging dominant class, that will bring change in the society. The question is why capitalists would win. Marx says in the conflict of interest, progressive class wins. Progressive class means that class who is affiliated to the developed technology or forces of production. So this is internal contradiction between old relations of production and new forces of production. Class struggle 2 between barons and serfs, between barons and capitalists. So barons serfs that will not be able to change the society, but barons and capitalist struggle would finally lead to establishment of capitalism. But this modus operandi of change would change when it comes to capitalism. Right? What he says, internal contradiction of capitalism is falling tendency of rate of profit. Falling tendency of rate of profit means as capitalism progresses, when you talk about capitalism, capitalism is based on two basic principles. One is maximization of profit, and second, capitalism operates in a free market situation. It is not regulated by the state. So in such situation, what will happen? Competition between different capitalists will lead to fall of rate of profit. This is called as falling tendency of rate of profit, and this is internal contradiction of capitalism. What happens because of this? It leads to centralization of capital, means capital gets concentrated in a few hands. This is concentration of capital. Centralization of capital means different capitalists, they merge with each other. Then proletariation of petty bourgeois means middle class owners like shop owners, street vendors, etc. They will turn proletariat. Proletariat means workers. Pauperization means the gap between rich and poor would increase, and laborer working class would become more and more poor. And then what will happen? It lead to change of class in itself to class for itself. Class itself means there is no unity among the working class. They are not aware of their plight, the cause of their plight. But when they change into class for itself, they come to develop. Here also it is called, in this situation there is a false consciousness. False consciousness means workers are not aware of the true nature of capitalism, but here they develop true consciousness. They are aware who is responsible for their plight, their poverty and their exploitation. Right? So when they convert into class for itself, they attain solidarity, they attain common consciousness, and then what happened? Proletariat revolution takes place. Now after proletariat revolution, they throw away the capitalist ownership, and then they establish socialism, which will further give way to communism. Now why here we talked about, is it relevant today? The first thing that we are asking, why we are asking the question itself, whether Marx and Marxist ideology, his theory of historical materialism, is relevant today or not. The reason is there are many people, there are certain events that occurred in the last quarter of 20th century, and those events gave the idea, propagated the idea that Marxism has failed, and Marxism is his historical materialistic theory. What was that? If you see China, China went for liberalization of its economy, not polity, in 1970s itself. Right? There was a controlled liberalization. In 1989, there was collapse of USSR. Collapse of USSR means USSR was a socialist country. The ideological center of socialism in the World War II, one was Kremlin or Moscow, and second was Beijing. Right? Then many of the satellite nations of the USSR, like Czechoslovakia, right? They also fell, and there also Berlin Wall fell, right? Fall of Berlin Wall, right? And establishment of capitalist economy and democratic politics. So what we have said, these events promulgated this idea that Marxism has lost its relevance. There is a person, American, though the name is Japanese, he might have migrated, right? He's migrated to USA, and he was supporter of capitalism, Francis Fukuyama. Marx said communism would be end of the history. He said end of the history of class struggle. Means now nobody would talk about class struggle. Nobody would talk about class struggle. Now, we see whether it is relevant or not. The two things we have to see here. First thing is that we have to first see whether follower of Marxism, follower of Marx, they consider the socialism in USSR as socialist in true sense of the term or not. Right? There is a hardcore Marxist, there is a mistake here, Trotsky, Leon Trotsky. Leon Trotsky says that Stalinism means the socialism in the period, the so-called socialism in the period of Stalin and the true socialism are not same. Rather, they are mutually exclusive. They are opposite to each other, right? And therefore, the fall was inevitable. What is the meaning of this? The meaning, Leon Trotsky says, he was exiled also by Stalin for his radical approach. He said that true communism or socialism had never come. Whether you talk about China, whether you talk about Austria, whether you talk about Czechoslovakia, USSR, East Germany, today you talk about North Korea, right? Nowhere the socialism is socialist in Marxist sense. So when there has never come this, where is the question of its collapse or it turning to be irrelevant, right? We'll go through another study, that is Mark Glick. Mark Glick in 1983, he wrote a book, The Current Crisis. It's almost 84 years, and in this 84 years, mainly he discussed the situation in USA, right? And he had certain observation. As you can see. what do you find? In 1899, the average rate of profit of the corporates were 22%. Today, it is only 10%. So what Marx had said? Rate of profit has a tendency to fall. And it is appearing to be true. Right? Then if you see, even today when you see the Oxfam report and other reports, what you find? That maximum wealth is concentrated in Fortune 500 companies. Right? If you look at Apple, if you look at Nvidia, if you look at Google, their turnover is much more than a large number of countries in the world. For example, Nvidia's turnover is more than India's gross domestic product. Right? Indian GDP is said to be around 4 trillion. Now the prices the dollar value has increased. There is devaluation of Indian rupee vis-a-vis dollar. So economy has moved from 4th position to 6th position. Right? So what is happening here? Nvidia's turnover, annual turnover is $5 trillion. It is more than the GDP of India. That means what? The concentration of capital is gradually growing and it is getting concentrated in a few hands. So more than 70% of the wealth is concentrated in the hands of 100 top corporates. This was observed by Mark Glick. Right? You can see the present data also. There is rising debt on common man. For example, if you see America itself, its GDP is around 33-34 trillion dollar, but debt is 38 trillion dollar. So debt is more than the GDP. That means each and every American has debt more than their income. Right? Now comparatively, the periods of recession is longer than prosperity and the gap is progressively increasing. Now you all might be knowing that the economy in capitalist system moves in cyclical way. That is, there are certain period which are called as period of prosperity or economic boom. This period of economic boom is followed by period of recession, and then again period of recession is followed by period of boom. So this is capitalist also accept it, right? That if there is boom, recession will come. But Glick's analysis says that the span of recession period is gradually growing and the span of boom period is going down. Just hypothetically, if previously the span of recession was 2 years and span of boom is 12 years, so in the next cycle, span of recession would be 4 and that of boom would be 8, and gradually what will happen? Today, the span of recession is 15-16 years and span of boom is hardly 4-5 years. Right? So this is the periods of recession is longer than prosperity and the gap is progressively increasing. So there is unemployment also, right? In European society, in American society. Now today also when you see today in India, the unemployment rate among the middle class has increased. Job market is, you don't have the proper job market. And yesterday itself I was watching, there is a Marcellus investment, and what some Mukherjee is there, he said that even IITians are not getting job, right? So this is significant expansion of unemployment. So all these things were said by Karl Marx. It was predicted by Karl Marx. So if all these things happening, that means Karl Marx has not turned irrelevant today. He is still relevant. Right? So as a conclusion, what we can say, Marx theory is still relevant and awakening tool to control the evils of capitalism by mobilizing labor force. Capitalism has its own evils, and when this evil raises its head, Marxist ideology comes to rescue the labor force. It reminds people of the evils of capitalism that helps in mobilization of the workforce, and then capitalists, they have to address the grievances of the working class, right? So this way you have to write. This is right, concluded. Now there is another announcement, and what is that? Exact model answer, the way it should be written, not points. I have uploaded on our Telegram channel, the Nice IS for Sociology Telegram channel. You can scan and become member of that, right? And you can access all the answers which we are discussing here in the way it has to be written in the exam, right? Thank you.